Imagine pulling up to your dream retreat, the one you poured every last penny into, only to find some stranger's truck parked there like they owned the place. And then, as you step out, heart pounding with that mix of excitement and nerves, a woman bursts from the door, eyes blazing, shotgun in her grip, yelling at you to get the hell off her land before she makes you regret it. Her voice echoing through the crisp mountain air that carried the faint scent of wood smoke and damp earth, making the whole scene feel like a twisted nightmare from which there was no waking. That's exactly how it started for me. Marcus Reed, a 52-year-old retired factory mechanic from Cleveland, the kind of guy who'd spent 3 decades wrenching on assembly lines through blistering summers and frozen winters, hands calloused from gripping tools that never quite fit right, eyes strained from fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry bees, socking away overtime like it was my lifeline, because it was, especially after my wife Laura slipped away from us 3 years back, battling that ruthless cancer that didn't just take her life. It drained our savings first. Hospital bills piling up like autumn leaves, treatments that promised hope but delivered only more pain, leaving me with hollowed-out grief and a promise she'd whispered in her final days, her hand frail in mine, skin paper-thin and cool, urging me to chase something real, something beyond just surviving. Her eyes, even then, sparkling with that fierce love that had carried us through 30 years of laughter, arguments, and quiet evenings on the porch watching the kids play. So there I was, deed in hand, fresh from a bank foreclosure auction, $92,000 wired away. Laura's life insurance blended with all those midnight shifts, the ones where I'd come home bone-tired, smelling of oil and metal, collapsing into bed beside her, for this rustic log cabin perched on 35 acres of rugged Kentucky hills, the photos online showing weathered timber walls that bore the scars of decades, a sturdy brick fireplace that whispered stories of warmer times, crackling fires on stormy nights, and vistas of rolling forests that tugged at my soul, making me think, yeah, this is where I rebuild, where I fix what's broken, starting with the sagging porch that creaked under imaginary footsteps, the outdated wiring that sparked like old memories. Because if there's one thing those factory years taught me, it's how to mend things that seem beyond saving, diagnosing faults with a multimeter and a prayer, turning chaos into order one bolt at a time. My kids had nudged me along. Sarah, the therapist, always emailing property links during her lunch breaks, her voice on the phone full of that gentle persistence, and Jordan, the builder, offering to swing hammers beside me, his truck already loaded with dreams of father-son projects, both saying, "Dad, you've earned this. Go for it." Their encouragement a balm on the wound that Laura's absence had left wide open. I closed the deal remotely, tech making it easy these days, with a clean title report, no liens lurking in the shadows like hidden debts, inspector giving the thumbs up on the bones of the place. Even if the plumbing screamed 1960s relic, pipes groaning like they held grudges, and as I drove those winding 6 hours from Cleveland with my old pal Frank, a burly contractor whose hands could wrestle steel beams into submission, his laugh booming over the radio static, our truck loaded with gear, bleach that promised to scrub away years of neglect, and a cooler of cheap beer for the win. The air grew crisp with pine and promise, the road twisting like a serpent through valleys where streams gurgled unseen below sheer drops, sunlight filtering through leaves that danced in the breeze, and I felt alive, truly alive, for the first time since Laura left, cracking the window to let the chill slap my face, carrying whispers of freedom, of starting over in a place where the stars weren't, drowned out by city lights. But around that final curve, gravel spitting under tires like scattered accusations, the cabin loomed just as pictured, except for the chaos. 2 SUVs and a beat-up sedan choking the drive, smoke puffing from the chimney like a cozy invasion, lights glowing warmly through windows that should have been dark and dusty, and before I could process, the door flew open, and out stormed this woman, mid-50s, hair dyed too bright under the fading sun, face caked in makeup that screamed entitlement, dressed in those stretchy leggings that say she's ready to demand refunds anywhere, her voice piercing the quiet like a siren. "This is our home. You're intruding. Turn around now." Her hands trembling slightly on the shotgun, not enough to miss, but enough to show she was as scared as she was furious. I grabbed my paperwork, stepped onto the stones that crunched like accusations under my boots, trying to explain. Ma'am, I own this. Look, here's the proof. The deed crisp in my fingers, ink still fresh from the printer, but she snatched at the pages, calling them bogus, insisting her ancestors framed this cabin beam by beam, logs hewn from the very trees that now shaded the property. And then her husband lumbered out, belly straining his flannel shirt, boots muddied like he'd been digging graves or perhaps just tending a garden that wasn't his, smirking that I'd been duped. The sale was a sham. They're taking back what's theirs, his eyes narrowing with that small-town suspicion of outsiders. My blood thrummed in my temples, the scent of roasting meat wafting from inside. My kitchen, damn it, where I imagined cooking simple meals, pancakes on lazy mornings, kids' bikes scattered on the deck like forgotten toys from a life I hadn't lived, blinds I'd never chosen fluttering in windows that framed views meant for my eyes alone. And I realized, these weren't visitors dropping by for tea. They were entrenched, living off my dime. In my space, furniture rearranged, walls perhaps repainted, in colors I'd hate. Frank whispered we needed legal muscle, fast, as the man dialed up the law, his fingers fat on the phone screen. And soon a patrol car rolled in, Deputy Harlan climbing out, mustache thick as a broom, belly testing his belt, shaking hands with the husband like old drinking buddies from Friday night barbecues, barely skimming my deed before declaring it a courtroom squabble. No one's getting booted today, possession's most of the law. Folks, his drawl lazy, eyes avoiding mine as if I were the intruder. I stood there, frozen in my own yard, watching them retreat inside, the door slamming like a verdict against me, laughter faintly audible through the walls, and as we drove off, hands trembling on the wheel, Frank muttering what the actual hell just happened up there. I felt robbed. Daylight heist with badges as accomplices, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows that mirrored my growing despair. Holing up in a dingy roadside and that reeked of stale regrets, cigarette burns on the carpet. Vending machines humming indifferently, staring at the ceiling till dawn, laptop glowing as I dove into Kentucky real estate rules, forums filled with horror stories of similar traps. Uncovering that the woman, Karen Whitaker, wasn't some random intruder wandering in. She was the area's hotshot property broker, her grin plastered on billboards along the highway, meaning she knew foreclosures inside out. Had spotted this one brewing in the public notices, tiny print in local rags that no one reads unless they're hunting bargains, and decided to pounce, turning squatting into strategy, delaying courts while living free. Because in Kentucky, claim jumping needs a decade of bold occupation, but chaos buys time, months turning to years in backlogged dockets. The injustice burned deep in my chest, a fire that wouldn't extinguish. Laura's savings vanished into this pit of deceit, her memory tainted by these thieves who turned her legacy into their free ride. And I thought, how many others had she crushed under her heel? Families displaced, dreams shattered. But I wasn't folding, not when family bonds and hard-earned dreams hung in the balance, the unfairness twisting like a knife in my gut, yet with a grim chuckle at the absurdity. Like, who expects a shotgun welcome to their fixer-upper, the kind of story you'd laugh about later if it didn't hurt so damn much? From that motel room haze, the hits kept coming, an email slamming in like a gut punch in the dead of night, a stop harassing us notice from some glossy Lexington firm, Karen's legal sharks claiming my title was tainted by some obscure flaw, threatening countersuits if I didn't back off and crawl home, dropping hints about her husband's gig as district code enforcer. The message crystal: push us, and we'll bury you in bureaucracy. Permits denied. Inspections failed. Your life a tangle of red tape. I tracked down Eleanor Vance, a sharp-eyed 60-something lawyer operating from a book-stuffed den that smelled of old ink and determination, cluttered with yellowed files and half-empty coffee mugs, her gaze cutting through my stack of docs like a laser, assuring me my claim was rock solid, backed by bank stamps and county seals, but warning Karen was stalling for the win, betting I'd crack under the weight of endless hearings. Her local ties thick as roots in the soil, judges who'd shared holidays with her family, clerks who'd bend rules for a smile. We fired off an urgent boot them out filing, attachments thick with evidence, but rural courts crawled like molasses in winter, hearings slotted weeks away, calendars jammed with petty disputes and divorce dramas, and I couldn't resist cruising by one foggy morning. engine idling low, spotting Victor's team slapping on an extension, concrete flowing like audacity from the mixer, then building equity on my nickel. Laughter mixing with the hum of tools, so I snapped pics from afar, rage bubbling. Like overheated oil, sending to Eleanor, who grinned over the phone. Let them overreach, it'll bite back in court. Their sweat turning to liability. Then the bank rang during breakfast, freezing my lines on my Cleveland rentals over some shadowy fraud tip tied to this mess. $25,000 locked away just when I needed it for repairs. Karen wielding Victor's leverage like a noose, squeezing my finances, aiming to starve me out. Bills piling up, motel charges eating at my reserves, and I paced that musty room, walls closing in, realizing this wasn't just theft of property. It was siege warfare on my spirit, them gunning for my everything, probably. Not their first rodeo, a pattern of predation hidden in plain sight. I called Frank, dig into Victor's dealings, permits pulled, all the public dirt buried in online databases. And though he hesitated, brother, these folks fight filthy, their tricks as dirty as the mud on their boots. I pushed, because surrendering meant betraying Laura's whisper, my kids' faith in me as the rock they'd always known. So we waged paper war, complaints to the state broker board on Karen's ethics clash, her profession clashing with her personal grabs, ethics panel on Victor's duel, hat conflict, wearing inspector badge while squatting like a fox in the henhouse, AG probing fraud with forms that demanded answers, rules bending when poked hard enough with facts. Karen hit back ugly, slamming my old mechanic shop online with scam accusations, her poison spreading through Kentucky social circles like wildfire in dry brush. Messages flooding in from unknown numbers, city boy crook, slink home before you get hurt. Even veiled threats about those twisty roads where accidents happen too easily. The isolation gnawing at my resolve like termites in wood. But then Mildred Lowe, ex-town recorder in her 60s, silver-haired and sly as a fox, cornered me at a greasy spoon over pie that tasted like home, spilling that Karen's kin never held title, just leased back in the 80s, a short stint ended by skipped payments and eviction notices yellowed with age, and she'd pulled this on 2 prior sales, bullying buyers into payouts with tears and threats, settlements hushed to protect reputations. We raided dusty archives in a basement lit by flickering bulbs, unearthing deeds proving no Whitaker lineage, just tenant flops and forgotten leases, arming me to confront Deputy Harlan in his office that smelled of coffee and complacency, who shrugged it off as still judge fodder, his loyalty glaring like neon. The network not myth, but machine oiled by favors and fear. Victor ambled to mine one rainy evening, leaning on my rig smug under the dripping eaves, offering $78K to vanish, dropping to 70 when I balked, eyes icing as he vowed permit hell statewide. Every project stalled, and I chased him off into the storm, pouring whiskey rare for me, the burn matching the fire in my veins. Sarah calling worried from her city apartment, maybe settle. Dad, it's not worth the toll. But I held firm. This for Laura, stubborn pride her gift that had seen us through lean times. Eleanor ramped up, fast-tracking with proof of unauthorized builds, photos showing fresh lumber stacked like accusations. Judge, a neutral import from afar. Halting work, but no toss yet, his gavel echoing hope, and I slapped a lawsuit-pending flag on the title, blocking flips to unwitting buyers. Karen countered wild, slapping a no-approach order, twisting drives-bys into stalking and affidavits laced with lies, local bench granting temp, barring me 500 feet from my own dirt, the bitterness acidic on my tongue like bad coffee. Media twisted it in the local rag, paper painting me as greedy invader versus hometown clan guarding heritage passed down through generations, comments venomous online, hoping I'd wreck on those slick curves, and a viral clip of Karen weeping theatrically on her porch racked shares, mascara streak performance tugging at sympathies I couldn't counter, family ties fraying as kin distanced themselves from the drama. But Frank struck pay dirt after hours in dim-lit libraries, unmasking Victor's firm-pocketed bank cash to safeguard the empty place pre-sale, receipts showing payments for locks and boards, yet they squatted early, social snaps proving timeline with timestamps and geotags, scheming auction ambush like predators circling prey. Eleanor amended charges, deceit, plot, larceny, turning civil to criminal, the air in her office thick with triumph. Karen's attorneys bailing like rats from a flood, citing conflicts that screamed exposure. Victor sidelined from enforcing, badge tarnished, sheriff probed under AG eyes that promised no mercy. Eve of hearing, my truck trashed in the lot, tires shredded like confetti, glass shattered into diamonds under moonlight, leaves scrawled in paint that dripped like blood, Deputy Harlan dismissing as pranks from bored teens, but I clung to Laura's image on my phone, her smile unyielding, fueling my stand. Eleanor's aide unearthed a botched 2010 tax grab in misfiled drawers. Whitaker kin losing adjacent acres to investors. Surveys fuzzy for years from lazy mappings. So I shelled for professional mapping. Surveyors trudging hills with gear. Results nailing my 32 acres clean. Their strips sold off to distant trusts. Karen's tale a muddle or con spun for sympathy. Judge shredded her in session. Booting order in 48 hours. Karen erupting like a volcano. Shrieking heritage theft amid sobs. Victor hissing burn threats in the hall. Breath hot with desperation. Bailiff intervening before fists flew. But a hazmat alert stalled. Anonymous claim of dangers buried in the basement. Inspection looming like a storm cloud. Eleanor sniffing setup with planted perils. Tension coiled tighter than a spring. Injustice searing my every thought. Family love fueling my stand against the tide. Revenge brewing righteous as we plotted exposure. The peak nearing with every shadow play. Calls to allies rallying like troops. Frank droning overhead for pre-damage shots that captured every unauthorized nail. Jordan trucking his team down through the night. Tools clanging with purpose. Mildred timeline prepping with charts that laid bare the lies. And Sophia Torres, a relentless Lexington journo famed for gutting graft in forgotten counties. Jumping in with notepad ready. Her lens poised to blast the corruption wide open. We pushed for dawn check with watchers present. Sophia snapping at first light as fog clung to the trees, and as the inspector rolled up in his official van. Victor barring entry with arms crossed like barriers, warrant demands flying back and forth in heated exchanges. But he caved under protocol, and inside, boom, barrels of waste oil stacked haphazardly, his firm's marks half-scraped in a rush. Illegal hordes self-inflicted and foolish, red tagging all with seals that meant vacancy. No one stays. Karen clawing at cameras in a frenzy. Cuffed for lunging at Sophia's gear. Assault sticking like glue. Victor deflated as his daughter wrecked interiors in fury. Smashing windows with a bat that splintered wood. Defacing walls with spray that reeked of chemicals. Arrested mid-rage by troopers who arrived, sirens blaring. The cabin a war zone of filth and ruin. Glass shards biting boots like tiny teeth. Pipes looted for scrap. The by-tragedy hitting like waves crashing over me. Unfairness. Raw and unrelenting. But family echoes. Laura's strength in my bones. Kids' calls lighting my phone. Pushing through. Righteous payback unfolding in real time. Sophia's expose exploded across wires. Arrests headlining morning editions. Reddit raging supportive with threads dissecting every twist. Apologies flooding from locals who'd bought the lies. And an AI-forged thread audio traced to Victor's kin through digital footprints. Feds raiding at dawn. Computers seized. Charges mounting like a house of cards collapsing. Hazmat sucked $10K from my dwindling funds. Crews in suits hauling barrels under watchful eyes. Demo revealing stolen halls and walls. Tools gleaming new. Wire spools heavy. Victims emerging from shadows. Victor buried in felonies that promised years behind bars. Karen tabloid flopping to jeers in comment sections ablaze. Victor slapped a work claim lean. Bogus and bounced by Eleanor's swift motion. My costs soaring to $40K extra. Eating into reserves I'd guarded fiercely. But locals chipped in unexpectedly. Lumber free from his debtors who'd suffered silently. Union hands volunteering weekends with sweat and solidarity. Meals warming sites from church groups who'd once sided against me, shifting me from foe to fixture in this tight-knit world. Then Victor rallied armed locals through back channels, trucks swarming at dusk, rifles legal and slung openly, chanting exclusion from the road's edge, police hands tied by laws that favored speech over safety, work frozen amid the standoff, media frenzy politicizing every angle with cameras flashing, but vets mobilized overnight, shielding us with disciplined lines, outmanning the mob who grumbled but dispersed under pressure, offering guard till finish. Their why's simple: bullies lose, and we've seen enough war to know right from wrong. Feds nailed Victor for fakes. 8 years caged in a plea that cracked his facade, ratting Karen out in transcripts that painted her as mastermind. Her license yanked with finality, home lost to auctions, probation and payouts looming like shadows. Daughter repaying vandalism costs monthly, disowning her in posts that went viral for their raw honesty. My porch rebuild overlooked sunsets with Jordan beside me. Tools down, beers cold, worth questioning amid the quiet. But yes, for legacy that extended beyond walls. Months on, I threw a community bash under clear skies, 250 strong converging with plates in hand, barbecue sizzling with aromas of smoke and spice, tours showing rebirth from ruin, fresh paint, sturdy floors, views unmarred, speech vowing belonging despite scars. When Karen crashed in a screech of tires, drunk ranting with vodka breath, vets blocking her path gently but firmly. My fact board dismantling her lies point by point under spotlights. Crowd awakening with murmurs turning to nods. Her hauled off humiliated by Deputy Harlan finally enforcing evenly. Victims spoke up, microphones passing like torches. AG probing wider scams that unraveled threads of deceit across counties. Applause thundering like approval from above. Deputy Harlan apologizing hat in hand. Reforms birthing from the ashes. Oversight boards. Transparency rules. Sophia captured healing. Music from a local band strumming bluegrass. Laughter mingling with cider tang sharp on the tongue. Hands clasping across old divides. Grace with Karen's girl who handed restitution with steady eyes. Ashes scattered for Laura on a hilltop breeze. Jordan relocating his family to start fresh nearby. Clinics launching monthly with lines of hopefuls. Handbook viral across states. Laws tightening via Reed bill that slashed squatter holds. Fund aiding dozens in similar binds. Channel teaching defenses with videos that racked views. Scholarship honoring skilled paths. Annual feast uniting under stars. System mended one policy at a time. Peace settling on that ridge like a blanket. Lights warm in windows. Stars witness to endurance. Laura's dream lived. Not flawless, but ours. Closure in every rebuilt beam. Every mended fence. Now, tell me in the comments, what would you do if corruption stole your haven? Fight or flee? Is justice always worth the scars? Or does mercy sometimes mean walking away? Drop your thoughts, because these battles question what's right, what's fair, what's human.